Senator Dole, Senator McCain, Senator Biden, welcome all. Senator Dole, if you were President Dole, what would you say to China this morning?
I'd say to China to call off the troops. I mean, this is a controlled demonstration, and for the safety of Jim Sasser, the family, all the people in the consulates there, they should do it very quickly.
Senator McCain?
Well, the Chinese have proved that they're pretty good at exercising security measures. We saw that at Tiananmen Square and other places. It's clear that the Chinese are orchestrating this for some political reason. It should stop immediately, and it can have long-term repercussions. This was a terrible accident that happened, but terrible accidents happen in war, and that's why we try to avoid it. But there's no excuse for this kind of treatment of the United States Embassy and its personnel.
Senator Biden?
I concur. It was a mistake. They know it was a mistake. What they're doing now is not a mistake, and therefore they're not of equal consequence. They can control what's happening.
Could I make one additional point? The Chinese must understand it is in their interest, in our interest, to see this war brought to its conclusion, and it's not in their interest or our interest to see very bad relations between our two countries.
Senator Dole, you wrote an op-ed piece in Friday's USA Today, Clinton NATO flash signs, they'll take peace at any price. The president says that he's not looking for total victory. Are you concerned that the Clinton administration is going to compromise out and give concessions and not get rid of Mr. Milosevic?
Well, I am concerned, and I hope it's not the case. In fact, that was sort of written to challenge the administration. They've gone from a NATO force to a NATO-led force to a NATO corps. And I think that the people who have been forgotten are the Albanians, the refugees, the deportees. And as one who's been supporting the president's policy, I hope we're still talking about victory. If you don't have victory, I don't know what you have. You have Milosevic still in power. He ought to be tried before The Hague. He ought to be in jail when this is over. We should not negotiate with Milosevic. And I'm just concerned that in this effort to end this, that there'll be some concessions made that are not in our interest.
Total victory means no more Milosevic.
Well, in my view, that may not be the way they'll interpret it, and I know you have problems. You have 19 other countries involved. Now you have Russia involved. I'd be a little careful about the Russian involvement, too. Remember, they were trying to help Saddam Hussein. But I want President Clinton to be firm, and I hope he will be firm, and if he is, he'll have, I think, substantial bipartisan support.
Senator McCain, the president says he is not asking for total victory. Does that concern you?
Yes. When we had the vote in the Senate that the administration lobbied against in order to make the president aware or give him some courage to exercise the constitutional authority he already had, when they lobbied against it, I think it's very clear that they're not prepared under any circumstances to use ground troops. So therefore, we're going to have a diplomatic solution. I think that there are some principles involved in that. One, it has to be, as Bob Dole said, it has to be NATO, not corps, etc. It has to be NATO. If the Russians and Ukrainians are involved, that can't be a de facto partition of the country. And it clearly has to be some kind of situation where the Kosovars could feel the confidence to come back, which means that it would be very difficult for them to accept a regime where the Serbs are again in control.
Senator Biden, is the president getting a little squishy on this?
Look, you have probably the only three people in Washington here who think we should go straight to Belgrade and arrest Milosevic. But let's not kid each other. We're the only three people. The rest of this is malarkey. The Republican Congress won't even vote for the bombing. The NATO forces won't even go along with the idea of ground troops. And whether or not the president will or will not is not relevant. The question, it seems to me, is what is the definition of victory? We sat in this program before. The definition of victory was all the troops out of Kosovo, the Albanians back in Kosovo, and a NATO-led force in Kosovo. That's not total victory. That's not the victory I want. That's not the victory John wants. I've been saying we should go on the ground. We should announce there's going to be American casualties. We should go to Belgrade, and we should have a Japanese, German-style occupation of that country, and we should have public trials in order to strike away this mask of this Serbian victimization so the people of Serbia know what's happened. It's the only thing that will ultimately work, but that's not what anyone but the three of us have been talking about from the beginning. So when the president says he's not for total victory, he's not for what we're for. But he never was, nor was NATO, nor was anybody but the three of us.
Senator Dole, we have had this war where we began with a limited bombing campaign, and a guarantee of no ground troops. The result has been 47 days, strained relations with the Russians, and now our embassy in China under siege. What is the state of this war? Are we losing?
Well, we're certainly not winning. I mean, if you look, in the tragic bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade certainly makes it more complicated. But again, I want to go back, not just limit this to Kosovo, go back to what happened in Bosnia, because the president said we ought to pattern this after Bosnia. Remember, there are 250,000 innocent people killed there, over 3 million refugees. In fact, this goes back to 1991 and 1992, 2 administrations. And Milosevic has been on the rampage for 10 years, and he ought to be tried as a war criminal. He is a war criminal. And as chairman of the International Commission on Missing Persons, we're going to be asking permission to go into Kosovo, where I believe we're going to find thousands and thousands of people buried in mass graves.
Senator McCain, many Americans say, is it worth it? Here we are, risking American lives. We are now having deep problems with China and Russia. Why not let NATO and Europe take care of this problem and get America out of it?
I think that's an excellent question. And when we fail to achieve our goals as stated and we fail to pursue every means necessary to achieve it, more and more of that kind of questioning will arise. I guess my counter-argument is that, one, we're already seeing instability in the region. There's stories about it today in Montenegro. The credibility of the Atlantic Alliance is at stake, and the credibility of the United States is at stake. I'm not talking about a domino theory here, but I am talking about there's a lot of people in the world that pay close attention to what we do and don't do and act accordingly, and I think that's a matter of history.
Senator Biden, are you concerned that we're going to compromise out, give concessions, and be seen as, in fact, losing this war?
The answer is I am. I spoke with him for 20 minutes with Bill Cohen last night because I wanted to ask some questions of the Secretary of Defense. One, is this going to be a NATO-led force? He said under no conditions will there be anything but a NATO-led force. Two, are all the troops going to have to be out of Yugoslavia? I mean, out of Kosovo? And he said, yes, they will. And I said, what's this about a bombing pause? He said, the only thing we're talking about there is if, in fact, there is overwhelming evidence that the troops are on their way out, we will not bomb them on their way out. Now, that's what he told me last night. The idea of things going bad with the Russians, actually things are going better for the Russians, which worries both of us a little bit. They're going better for the Russians. Two, they were already bad with the Chinese. And three, the reason why it's so important that we're in there is quite bluntly, and I get in trouble for saying this, but the Europeans have never led anything. We are a European power. If we are not pushing this, the whole thing will collapse. And that's where I do have some sympathy for John's criticism of the administration. I think it's a little excessive, but John's criticism of the administration, which is that they're not doing enough. We are the driver. We're the driver. We're a European power. If we don't do it, no one else in Europe will.
Senator Dole, you have been in the forefront of this issue for a long time. What advice would you give President Clinton this very morning?
Just don't lose your resolve. I mean, Senator Biden's correct. I mean, if we're not leading the effort, it's going to collapse. And that's why the president went to Germany to visit with the German chancellor to make certain he was still on board. And some of these countries have very fragile coalitions. They could fall apart in a moment. But we are the leaders. And we took this assignment on. We accepted this responsibility. And if we don't do the things that President Clinton indicated would happen, then in my view, it's a failure.
But just keep bombing and bombing and bombing until Milosevic gives in.
I'm like the other two here, that we should have not taken the option of ground troops off the table.
But it is off the table.
It's off forever now.
But so bombing's working, Tim. Look, here's where we disagree. The only reason Milosevic is even talking about talking is because he's being hurt badly. We've had 5 clear days. 5 clear days, that's all in the bombing. And now we're going to be moving on 360 degrees, 24 hours a day. I would use ground troops. The NATO will not use ground troops, but the bombing is inflicting.
Is the bombing working?
No, and I think Mr. Milosevic is willing to talk once he's achieved most of his goals, which he has. Our goals at the beginning were to rid Kosovo of Serbs. There are now more Serb troops there than there were at the beginning.
And the bombing indirectly, John, is helping, cleanse Kosovo, because you bomb Belgrade and that incites the Serb army and others to kick out more people in Kosovo.
And the failure to even threaten the use of ground troops expedited the efficiency of ethnic cleansing.
Senator Dole, if Mr. Milosevic looks up and says, okay, fine, I'm pulling out the Serbian troops, the refugees can come back, but guess what? The KLA insurgent army is gone. I finished it off. So you can stay there and live in peace, but you are subservient to me, Kosovar Albanians. He's won.
Well, no doubt about it. If that happens, then I'm going to, well, I don't have any influence anymore. I'm not in government.
What will you do? What will you say?
Well, I'll say it as loudly as I can. It's a big, big disaster for the United States and for NATO.
But that's not going to happen. We can't let that happen.
They are desperately seeking a diplomatic solution, and they're not dealing from a position of strength. That's why I'm very
this guy off
concerned.
to The Hague. That's where.
Well, I agree with that, but remember, that was never part of the deal that everybody signed on
That's right.
except the three of
That's right.
us. So let's
No,
be
no, I
fair
never
about
even
it.
said
All right, we'll be back with a lot more of the Three Amigos. We have to take a quick break. A lot more coming up after this. Dole, John McCain, Joe Biden, thank you. Coming next, why did we give